How's it going? Today is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. Covering this book, Old School versus New School Baseball Eras. Covering 150 years between 1870 and 2020, roughly. This video, Strikeouts. Let me ask you a question. Which pitchers average the most strikeouts in a certain time period? So let's take the first 75 years, 1870 to about 1949, roughly. What did pitchers average strikeouts per game? Who was the leader in strikeouts for a certain year? And what was the average for a 10-year period? Let's look at it. I consider 1870 through about 1949 old school. So let's look at it. In the 1870s, the average strikeout per year, 72 strikeouts by a pitcher. Who had the most? John Ward, 239 strikeouts. So in the 1880s, what was the average? It went up 284 strikeouts, average for the 10-year period. Add up the 10 years, and that's the average. Who had the most? Charlie Radburn had 441 strikeouts one year. 1890s, average went down to 214 for the decade. Who had the most? Amos Rusi, 341. 1900s, the average strikeout, 238. And who had the most for the decade? Rube Waddell had 349 one year. 1910, the average strikeouts, 232. Who had the most during that decade for a season? Walter Johnson, 303. 1920s, the average, 189 strikeouts. Who had the most? Dazzy Vance, 262 one year. 1930s, the average is 203. And who had the most? Bob Feller, 246. And the average for the 1940s, 203, same as the 1930s. And the most again was by Bob Feller, had 348 one year. So the aggregate strikeouts for the first 75 years of baseball, 204 strikeouts. Add up to 75 years, 204. Let's look at the new school era, 1950s through 2022, roughly. 1950s, the average, 184. Who had the most? Don Drysdale, 242 one year. 1960s, the average, 279. It goes up. Who had the most? Sandy Koufax, 382. 1970s, the average, 304. So it goes up in the 70s. Who had the most? Nolan Ryan, 383. 1980s, average goes down, 245. And the most in 1 year was by Nolan Ryan, 301. 1990s, the average, 278. Who had the most? Randy Johnson came in with 364 one year. And the average for the 2000s, 246 strikeouts. And who had the most during that decade? Randy Johnson, 372. Boy, he just missed out of breaking the record. The record is 383 by Nolan Ryan. So Randy Johnson, 372. So what's the aggregate strikeouts for the second 75-year period? 256. Guess what? New school wins. I've been covering a lot of categories. I've done 13 offensive categories, and I'm on my 5th pitching category. So in the 13 categories, it was 8-5, old school won. In the pitching, it's been 4-0, old school. But in strikeouts, new school wins. So let's put it down. Strikeouts. The old school averaged 204 for the first 75 years, but the new school averaged 256, so they win. So after 13 categories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 offensive categories, 8-5 old school, and 5 pitching categories, 4-1 old school. So it is 12-6 old school. I've got shutouts, then ERA, and then defense. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'm out.